The lights in the great hall flickered once, twice, then held steady. Admiral Tay stood at the center of the War Council chamber, his hands clasped behind his back. Around him sat the 12 leaders of humanity. Their faces were hard. Their eyes were older than their bodies. These were people who had been born in darkness, raised in darkness, and had never known anything but the cold void between stars. 60,000 years. That was how long humanity had wandered through space. That was how long they had waited. Tay remembered the stories his grandmother told him when he was a child. She had heard them from her grandmother, who had heard them from hers. The chain of memory stretched back through countless generations, all the way to the night when Earth burned. The Vorn had come without warning. Their ships filled the sky like a swarm of insects. They gave no demands. They offered no chance to surrender. They simply decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist, and so they erased an entire world in a single night. But they made a mistake. They did not hunt down the colony ships that fled into the darkness. 60,000 years, Tay said, his voice echoing through the chamber. Our ancestors ran. They had no choice. They were weak, broken, and afraid, but they survived. They built ships. They raised children. They passed down one simple truth from parent to child, generation after generation. He paused and looked at each council member in turn. We will return, and we will have our revenge. The council members nodded. This was not new information. Every human child learned this truth before they learned to walk. It was written in their laws. It was carved into the walls of every ship. It was the reason humanity still existed. Eunice stepped forward. She was the fleet's chief intelligence officer, a woman whose mind worked like a machine. Her job was to listen to the whispers of the galaxy, to decode enemy transmissions, to know what the Vorn were doing before they did it. She had spent her entire life studying the enemy that had destroyed her ancestors. I have news, she said. Her voice was calm, but Tay could see the fire burning in her eyes. The Vorn Empire still exists. It has grown. It controls over 800 star systems now. They have enslaved dozens of other species. She pressed a button, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a map of the galaxy with Vorn territory marked in red. The red covered a massive section of space. They believe we are extinct, Una continued. They have monuments on every world celebrating the destruction of Earth. They teach their children that humanity was a disease that they cured. They have not thought about us in thousands of years. General CO let out a dry laugh. He was the oldest person in the room, a man who had spent over 100 years planning for this moment. His body was failing, kept alive only by machines and medicine, but his mind was still sharp as a blade. Good, CO said. Let them forget. Let them grow fat and lazy. It will make the killing easier. Tay nodded slowly. He walked to the hologram and pointed at a small yellow dot on the edge of Vorn space. This is Sol, he said. This is where Earth used to be. Our home. The Vorn have turned it into a mining colony. They dig metals from the corpse of our world and use them to build their ships.
Silence.
Silence fell over the council. Every person in the room felt the weight of those words. Earth was not just a planet. It was a sacred place, a memory passed down through countless generations. And the Vorn had turned it into a resource extraction site. I have seen the reports, Una said quietly. They built a throne for their emperor using metals from Earth's core. He sits on a chair made from our dead world.
Ouch.
Tay felt his hands tighten into fists. He forced himself to stay calm. Anger was useful, but only when controlled. His ancestors had learned that lesson the hard way. We have prepared for 60,000 years, Tay said. We have built weapons they cannot imagine. We have trained soldiers who know nothing but war. Our ships are invisible to their sensors. Our technology is beyond anything they have ever seen. Turn to face the council. The question before us is simple. Do we continue to hide in the darkness? Do we wait another 1,000 years? Another 10,000? Or do we finally do what our ancestors swore to do? The vote was unanimous. 12 hands raised. 12 voices spoke as one. War. Tay closed his eyes for a moment, He thought of his grandmother, who had died when he was young. He thought of all the generations before him, all the people who had lived and died in the darkness, holding on to hope that one day their children would see justice. Then it begins, Tay said. Send the order to all ships. Prepare the fleet for departure. We move in 30 days. The council members stood and left the chamber one by one. Soon, only Tay and Yuna remained. She walked to stand beside him, looking at the hologram of Vorn space. 60,000 years, she said softly. Do you think they remember us at all? Tay shook his head. No, we are nothing to them. A footnote in their history. A species they exterminated and forgot. And that is their mistake, Yuna said. Tay agreed. That is their mistake. He reached out and touched the hologram, his fingers passing through the image of Earth's dead sun. They thought extinction was our end, he said. They were wrong. It was only our beginning. The lights flickered again. Somewhere deep in the ship, engines that had been dormant for centuries began to wake. The great vessel shuddered and then began to move. Behind it, thousands of other ships followed. The human fleet, hidden for 60,000 years, was finally going home, and they were bringing hell with them. The scout ship's silent fang moved through space like a ghost. No light escaped its hull. No heat signature betrayed its presence. To any sensor in the galaxy, it simply did not exist. Captain Wu stood at the helm, watching the stars drift past the view screen. Behind him, his crew worked in silence. They had been trained for this mission since childhood. Every person on this ship knew that they might never return. None of them cared. They had a purpose greater than their own lives. We are entering Vorn space, said Hannah, the ship's tactician. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a mind that could calculate 1,000 possibilities in seconds. No detection so far? Wu nodded. Keep us dark. I want to see what we are dealing with before they know we exist. The Silent Fang had been traveling for months. It was the first human ship to enter enemy territory in 60,000 years. Behind it, far behind it, the main fleet was still gathering. But Admiral Tay needed information. He needed to know the enemy's strength, their positions, their weaknesses. That was why Wu and his crew had been sent ahead. Jin, the weapons specialist, looked up from his console. He was a large man with gentle eyes that turned cold whenever he talked about the Vorn. I am picking up a colony world ahead. Population around 50 million. Mostly Vorn, but I am detecting other species too, slaves, Hannah said quietly. The Vorn use other species as workers. They have been doing it for thousands of years. Wu felt his jaw tighten. Humanity had learned much about the Vorn during their long exile. They had intercepted transmissions, studied captured data, pieced together the history of the empire that had destroyed them. The Vorn were not just conquerors. They were masters of cruelty. They believed that lesser species existed only to serve them. Take us closer, Wu ordered. I want to see this world with my own eyes. The Silent Fang descended toward the planet. As they approached, the view screen filled with images that made the crew fall silent. The world below was gray and scarred. Massive factories covered the surface, belching smoke into the sky. Long lines of workers moved between buildings, watched by armed Vorn guards. Even from orbit, Wu could see the misery. But that was not the worst part. In the center of the largest city stood a monument. It was a massive statue of a Vorn warrior standing on top of a broken sphere. The sphere was Earth. The statue showed the Vorn crushing humanity's homeworld beneath its feet. They celebrated, Jin whispered. His hands were shaken. They celebrate what they did to us. Hannah was already recording everything. This is not the only one. I am detecting similar monuments on 14 other worlds in this sector alone. They have turned the destruction of Earth into a symbol of their power. Stared at the statue for a long moment. Then he turned away, continued the mission. We need more information. For the next several weeks, the Silent Fang moved from system to system. They mapped Vorn military bases. They counted their ships. They studied their weapons and their defenses. What they found was both encouraging and terrifying. The Vorn Empire was massive. It controlled hundreds of worlds and trillions of citizens. Its military was the largest in the known galaxy. But it was also slow. It was lazy. It had not faced a real threat in thousands of years. The Vorn had grown comfortable in their power. They had forgotten what it meant to fight an enemy that truly wanted them dead. Wu sent regular reports back to Admiral Tay. Each report painted the same picture. The Vorn were strong, but unprepared. They had no idea what was coming. Then Hannah discovered something that changed everything. "Captain," she said one day, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion, "I have decoded a transmission from the Vorn homeworld. It contains information about their emperor. What about him?" Wu asked. Hannah looked up at him. Her eyes were wet. His throne. It was built using metals harvested from Earth's core. The transmission calls it his greatest treasure, a reminder of the Vorn's greatest victory. The bridge fell silent. Every person on the ship understood what that meant. The Vorn Emperor sat on a throne made from the remains of their dead world. He used their ancestors' grave as furniture. Jin broke the silence first. His voice was calm, but there was something terrible in it. "I want to be there when we kill him. I want to watch him die sitting on that throne." Wu did not respond. He simply turned back to the view screen and gave his next order. "Set course for the fleet rendezvous point. Admiral Tay needs to see this." The silent Fang turned and began its journey back. Behind it, the Vorn Empire continued its normal routine, unaware that death was coming. Unaware that the species they had tried to exterminate was still alive. Unaware that 60,000 years of hatred was about to be unleashed upon them. When Wu finally reached the fleet, found Admiral Tay waiting for him. The old admiral listened to the report in silence. He watched the recordings of the monuments. He read about the Emperor's throne. When it was over, Tay stood up and walked to the window of his ship. Outside, the human fleet stretched across space like a field of stars. Thousands of ships. Billions of soldiers. 60,000 years of preparation. "They made us into this," Tay said quietly. "They burned our world and scattered us into the darkness. They thought they were destroying us. Instead, they were creating the instrument of their own destruction." He turned to face Wu.
"All the fleet."
"We move at dawn." The war for revenge was about to begin. The war did not begin with fire and explosions. It began with silence. On the border world of Nexer Prime, Vorn communications officer noticed something strange on his screen. 3 patrol ships had stopped sending signals. He tried to contact them. No response. He checked his equipment. Everything was working. He sent another message. Still nothing. He reported the problem to his supervisor. The supervisor told him to wait. The ships were probably experiencing technical difficulties. It happened sometimes. By morning, all 3 ships were gone. Not destroyed, just gone. Vanished into the darkness of space without a trace. This was happening across the entire eastern frontier of the Vorn Empire. Outposts went silent. Patrol routes became empty. Ships disappeared. And no one understood why Commander Nari watched all of this from the bridge of her ship. The Shadow's Edge. She was the leader of the Ghost Division, humanity's most elite military unit. Her soldiers had trained their entire lives for this moment. They were weapons designed for one purpose: to kill Vorn. "Status report," she said calmly. Her second-in-command, a young officer named Bora, checked her console. "All 37 targets have been eliminated. No distress signals sent." "No survivors?" Nari nodded. This was exactly as planned. The first phase of the war was not about destruction. It was about confusion. The Vorn needed to fear something they could not see or understand. "Begin phase 2, Nari ordered. "We are taking Nexer Prime." Nexer Prime was a fortress world. It housed over 2 million Vorn soldiers and was considered one of the most heavily defended positions in the Empire. The Vorn believed it was unconquerable. They were wrong. The human assault began at midnight local time. There was no warning. No fleet appeared in the sky. No alarm sounded. The first sign of attack was when the power grid failed across the entire planet. Emergency lights flickered on, and then those died too. In the darkness, human soldiers moved like ghosts. They wore armor that bent light around them, making them invisible. Their weapons made no sound. They killed without leaving marks. One moment, a Vorn guard was standing at his post. The next moment, he was dead on the ground. And no one had seen anything. Nari led the assault on the Central Command building personally. She moved through corridors filled with panicking Vorn officers. They could not see her. They could not hear her. They only knew death was among them when their colleagues started falling. Vorn General managed to reach a communication device before he died. He screamed into it, trying to warn the rest of the Empire. But his words were cut off before he could finish. Nari's blade had already found his throat. 6 hours. That was how long it took to kill 2 million soldiers. When the sun rose over Nexer Prime, every Vorn on the planet was dead. The slave species they had kept in chains emerged from their quarters to find their masters gone. They did not understand what had happened. They only knew they were free. Nar left a single human soldier behind. His job was to tell the slaves who had saved them. To tell them that humanity had returned. News of Nexer Prime reached the Vorn capital 3 days later. The High Command gathered in emergency session. They looked at the reports with disbelief. An entire fortress world eliminated overnight. No distress signal. No survivors. No explanation. "Is impossible," said one general. "Nothing could have done this." "Perhaps it was internal rebellion," suggested another. The slave species rising up. Emperor Cole sat on his throne of earth metal and listened to his generals argue. He was an old creature, ancient by any standard, but his mind was still sharp. He had ruled the Vorn Empire for 3,000 years. He had overseen the extermination of 17 species. He had built an empire that spanned hundreds of worlds. But something about these reports troubled him. His advisor, Lor, stepped forward. Lor was even older than the Emperor. He had been alive when Earth burned. He remembered the war against humanity. He remembered the fear the Vorn had felt before they won. "My Emperor," Lor said carefully, "I believe we should consider another possibility." "Speak," Cole commanded. "What if some of them survived?" The chamber fell silent. Several generals laughed nervously. The idea was absurd. Humanity had been exterminated 60,000 years ago. Everyone knew that. But Cole did not laugh. He stared at Lor with ancient eyes. "We made sure they were destroyed," Cole said. "We burned their world. We hunted their colonies. We killed billions." "We killed billions," Lor agreed. "But we never found all their ships. Some escaped into deep space. We assumed they would die in the darkness. But the humans were never like us, my Emperor. They did not fight to conquer. They fought to survive. And survival breeds monsters." Cole looked down at his throne, at the metal that had once been Earth's core. For the first time in centuries, he felt something cold in his chest. Fear. "Find out what is happening," he ordered. "Send the fleet. I want answers." But answers were already coming. Across the Empire, more worlds were going silent. More ships were vanishing. The enemy moved faster than the Vorn could respond. And with each passing day, the fear grew. Something was out there in the darkness. Something that had waited 60,000 years. And it was hungry for blood. The human advance was like a flood. It could not be stopped. It could not be slowed. It swept across Vorn space, leaving only death behind. Admiral Tay stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the reports come in. Another world fallen. Another fleet destroyed. Another million Vorn dead. The numbers should have made him feel something. Pride, perhaps, or satisfaction. But he felt nothing. This was not a war. It was an execution. And executions were not meant to be enjoyed. Beside him, Yuna updated the tactical display. The map of Vorn space was changing rapidly. Red territories were turning gray as human forces claimed them. The Empire was collapsing faster than anyone had predicted. "The slave species are rising up everywhere," Yuna reported. Our agents have been supplying them with weapons and information. The Vorn cannot fight us and control their slaves at the same time. Tay nodded. This had been part of the plan. The Vorn had spent thousands of years oppressing other species. Now those species were turning against them. Every soldier the Vorn sent to fight humanity was a soldier who could not control the rebellions at home. What is our next target? Tay asked. Yuna did not answer immediately. She touched the display, and a familiar star system appeared. A yellow sun surrounded by 8 planets. One of those planets was nothing but a burned rock, still scarred from the fires of 60,000 years ago. Sol, Yuna said quietly. Earth. The bridge fell silent. Every person on the ship turned to look at the display. They had seen images of Sol their entire lives. They had dreamed of it. They had prayed for this moment. And now, it was finally here. Set course, Tay ordered. It is time to go home. The human fleet arrived in Sol 3 days later. They found a Vorn mining operation in full activity. Massive stations orbited what remained of Earth, extracting metals from its dead crust. Smaller operations covered Mars and the asteroid belt. The Vorn had turned humanity's birthplace into a factory. The battle lasted less than an hour. Human ships overwhelmed the Vorn defenders with brutal efficiency. Mining stations were destroyed. Transport vessels were captured. When it was over, the solar system was silent once again. Tay ordered the fleet to hold position while ground forces descended to Mars. He wanted his soldiers to see what had been done to their ancestors' home. Day was one of those soldiers. He was young, barely 20 years old, experiencing his first real campaign. He had trained his entire life for war, but nothing had prepared him for what he found on the Martian surface. The Vorn had not bothered to clean up when they took over the solar system. Human settlements still stood where they had been abandoned 60,000 years ago. Cities frozen in time. Vehicles rusting in ancient garages. And everywhere, there were bones. Day found them in a collapsed building. Hundreds of skeletons huddled together in what must have been a shelter. Men, women, and children. They had hidden here when the Vorn came. They had died here, waiting for rescue that never arrived. He knelt beside the remains and felt tears running down his face. Around him, other soldiers were having similar experiences. Hardened warriors who had killed without hesitation were now weeping openly. The reality of what had happened to their ancestors was finally hitting them. General. Suk watched the scene from a hover platform. He was too weak to walk now, his body kept alive only by machines. But he had insisted on being here. He had waited his entire life for this moment. Look at them, he said to his aide. Look at what the Vorn did. Remember it. Let it fuel your hatred. His aide nodded silently. Sio closed his eyes. He knew he did not have much time left. His body was failing. But he could die now, knowing that he had done his part. He had planned this war. He had trained the soldiers who were fighting it. He had kept the flame of revenge burning when others wanted to give up. No mercy, Siok whispered. His final words, they showed us none. He died that night, surrounded by the bones of his ancestors. They buried him on Mars in the soil that still held human remains from 60,000 years ago. He would rest among his people forever. The news of Siok's death spread through the fleet. It did not cause despair. It caused rage. The soldiers who had wept over ancient bones now hardened into something terrible. They wanted blood. They wanted revenge. They wanted the Vorn to suffer as their ancestors had suffered. The Vorn tried to negotiate. Ambassadorships arrived carrying messages of peace. They offered territory. They offered wealth. They offered to release their slaves. They begged for mercy. Admiral Tay listened to their offers. Then he sent his response. It was broadcast across the galaxy on every frequency in every language. He wanted every species to hear it. He wanted the Vorn to understand exactly what was coming. You burned our world, Tay said, his voice cold and steady. You've scattered our people to the void. For 60,000 years we remembered. We prepared. We waited. Now we have returned, not for territory, Not for wealth, not for slaves. We have returned for justice. There will be no negotiation. There will be no surrender. There will only be reckoning. He paused for a moment, then continued. We are coming for your emperor. We are coming for your homeworld. We are coming for everything you hold dear. And when we are finished, the galaxy will remember what happens to those who try to destroy humanity. The transmission ended. Across Vorn space, billions of creatures heard it. The Vorn heard it with terror. The slave species heard it with hope. And humanity heard it with grim satisfaction. The final battle was coming, and there would be no mercy. The Vorn homeworld had no name. The Vorn simply called it the Center, because they believed it was the center of all creation. For 100,000 years, it had been the seat of their power. The greatest buildings in the known galaxy rose from its surface. The wealthiest citizens in the empire walked its streets, and in the heart of its largest city stood the Imperial Palace, where Emperor Cole ruled from his throne of earth-metal. Now, human ships darkened its sky like a swarm of angry insects. Commander Nari stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the Vorn's last desperate defense crumble. Their fleet was impressive by normal standards. Thousands of warships, each carrying enough firepower to destroy a moon. But against humanity's technology, they might as well have been throwing rocks. Their shields are failing, reported her second-in-command. Main fleet will breach the orbital defenses in approximately 6 minutes. Nari nodded. Prepare the Ghost Division for ground assault. I want us in that palace before the main forces land. Understood, Commander. The final battle was not really a battle. It was more like an execution. Vorn ships exploded one after another as human weapons tore through their hulls. Orbital platforms fell from the sky like burning meteors. The citizens below looked up and saw their world ending. Nari's dropship descended through the chaos. Anti-aircraft fire streaked past them, but nothing could hit a target that did not appear on sensors. They landed in the courtyard of the Imperial Palace without losing a single soldier. The palace guards tried to stop them. They were the elite of the Vorn military, warriors who had trained their entire lives to protect the Emperor. They lasted approximately 3 minutes. Nari's soldiers moved through them like wind through leaves, killing without slowing down. Nari herself led the charge into the palace. She knew the layout from intelligence reports. She knew exactly where the throne room was. She had dreamed of this moment for her entire life. The doors to the throne room were massive, carved from stone that had been harvested from a conquered world. Nari blasted them open with a single shot. Inside, she found Emperor Cole. He was sitting on his throne, just as she had imagined. The throne made from Earth's core. The throne that represented everything the Vorn had taken from humanity. He was surrounded by his final guards, a dozen warriors who stood ready to die for him. They did die for him, quickly and efficiently. Nari's soldiers eliminated them in seconds. Then it was just Nari and the Emperor. She walked toward him slowly, her weapon raised. Cole did not move. He did not try to run. He did not beg for mercy. He simply sat there, watching her approach with ancient eyes. So, he said, his voice echoing through the empty chamber. The humans have returned. Nari stopped a few meters from the throne. She looked at the old creature before her. He had ruled an empire that spanned hundreds of worlds. He had ordered the deaths of trillions. He had tried to erase her entire species from existence. Yes, she said. We have returned. Cole studied her face. You do not look like the humans I remember. You are different. Harder. Colder. You made us this way, Nari replied. 60,000 years ago, you tried to destroy us. Instead, you taught us what the universe truly was. Cruel, merciless, unforgiving. So we became crueler, more merciless, more unforgiving. We became what you feared we would become. Cole was silent for a moment. Then he asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the war began. How? How did you survive? We burned your world. We hunted your ships. We killed billions. How did you possibly survive? Nari removed her helmet. Her face was calm, cold, There was no hatred in her eyes anymore. Only certainty, 'cause we are human, she said simply. We survive. It is what we do. You should have made sure we were truly dead. She raised her weapon. Cole said, not begging, just asking. Will you destroy my people, as we destroyed yours? Nari considered the question. It was something the War Council had debated for months. Some wanted complete extermination, an eye for an eye. Others argued for mercy. In the end, Admiral Tay had made the final decision. No, Nari said. We are not like you. We will not commit genocide. Your people will live. They will rebuild. They will have children and grandchildren. Something like relief flickered across Cole's face. But Nari continued, they will remember. Every generation will be taught what happened here. They will learn about the species they tried to destroy and failed. They will live in a galaxy ruled by humanity, knowing that they exist only because we allowed it. That is your punishment, not death. Memory. You will remember us forever. She pulled the trigger. 1 year later, Admiral Tay stood on the surface of Earth. The planet was still dead, still scarred, but human engineers had begun the long process of healing it. Machines worked day and night, cleaning the atmosphere and preparing the soil for life. Tay was old now. The war had taken everything from him. But standing here, on the world of his ancestors, he felt something he had not felt in years. Hope, while Yuna walked up beside him. She was Fleet Admiral now, commanding all of humanity's military forces. But today, she was just a woman standing on her species' homeworld for the first time. What do we do now? She asked. Tay watched the sun rise over Earth's broken horizon. It was the first sunrise a human had witnessed here in 60,000 years. The light was golden and warm, touching a world that had been cold for so long. We rebuild, he said. Grow. We become something better than what the darkness made us. He turned to look at her. We won, Yuna. We survived. We returned. We had our revenge. But revenge is not enough to build a future on. Now we have to find a new purpose. Something beyond hatred. Yuna nodded slowly. She understood. The war had defined humanity for 60,000 years. Now, they needed to find out who they were without it. The Vorn survivors, she said. What should we do with them? Tay looked back at the sunrise. He thought about everything his species had suffered. Everything they had lost. Everything they had become. Let them live, he said quietly. Let them watch us rebuild. Let them see us become the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known. Let them understand, finally, that they failed. He paused. And let them remember, forever. The sun continued to rise over Earth. A new day was beginning. After 60,000 years of darkness, humanity had finally come home, and they would never leave again.